So welcome everyone to the Spirit of EQ webinar on EQ, leadership, and dancing. And we are going to take a look at a slide deck. I'm going to share my screen. Do realize that many out there might be kind of wondering, what in the world are you trying to say about leadership, dancing, and EQ, if I got it in the reverse order there. But there is a method to our madness. And as I am about to pull up my slide deck, you'll kind of get an idea of what that's all about. This kind of came to me about maybe close to 2 months ago, and trying to look at some correlations between EQ, emotional intelligence, leadership, and dancing. And let me make it clear to you right out of the gate, I, by no stretch of the imagination, am a dancer. However, I am a creative, so I always like to observe artists when they're doing their thing. And there is some definite correlation with that. And before we get too deeply into that part of the webinar, a little bit about definitions. I think that's important. Some of you who may have experienced our process have understood our definition around emotional intelligence, but I never like to forget to do that. And as we go along here, our definition is really kind of straightforward. You can see with the slide is that ultimately emotional intelligence is just kind of blending your thoughts and your emotions or feelings so that you can make optimal decisions. The reality is that every day we're confronted with different thoughts and the emotions that come with that. And what we believe is that the better you're at managing those, the blending, if you will, the better you will be at in making optimal decisions. Now, if you're like me, I've got a track record that has some decisions that I'd rather have back. I would rather have the opportunity to do it over again. And one thing I can find with that is that there's some definite correlations between how I responded to those thoughts and emotions and how I managed them as to what decision was made. So it's our desire, our hope, that we can give you some powerful information, not only today, but ongoing, what we try to endeavor to do, so that you can become that better decision maker, that person who on a consistent basis is making optimal decisions, whether it's in work, life, family, community, whatever it may be, and wherever it shows up, and make the world a better place, not only for you and yours and those closest to you, but maybe the world at large as well. So EQ in action for us is made up of this kind of illustration around three different quadrants, as I call them. And that's the know yourself quadrant, the choose yourself quadrant, and then the give yourself. I kind of liken it, as you can see here in the slide, that the know yourself is, kind of identifying what am I feeling? It's kind of the self-knowledge, self-awareness. What options do I have? Meaning, what am I going to choose to do with what I'm managing? And then the give yourself side. What is it that I truly want? And that kind of coincides a lot with purpose and direction and empathy and things of that nature. It's kind of laid out in a sense. Our process is made up of 8 competencies, as we call them. And these are learnable. So there's, if you've ever taken one of our assessments, you would understand that at the end of the day, ours are non-judgmental in nature. Regardless of where you may score, how well you're doing in these competencies, they're learnable, so you can get better at them. And again, that kind of drives back to the first slide there about how we define it, making those optimal decisions. So ultimately, you can see each of those areas again, and then the competencies that coincide. There's 8 of them. And in our work, we help people get stronger and leverage these for greater decision-making power. I'm going to show you a brief video. It's a clip from a film that I absolutely love, and really kind of coincides back to what I said at the beginning of how I kind of started observing dancing, right? So a quick story for you. My wife and I were invited to a birthday party that was held at a Fred Astaire dance studio. Now, I will be totally transparent and tell you that kind of sent a little bit of shiver up my spine because, as I said, I'm not a dancer per se, and those kind of things don't really appeal to me. However, you know, be fun, take a chance, all that other good stuff, and we did it. And what I found is that there were some great correlations in decision making and leadership. This clip that we're going to look at here in a second will kind of illustrate that too. But what I found is that those things kind of coincide and they work together in harmony. And I think if you were like me, when you think back to who are the best leaders in your life, regardless of the area of life that they may have been in, what are some of the things that you observed about them that made them such great leaders? And more often than not, you probably will find that those competencies that we looked at earlier, things like recognizing patterns, applying consequential thinking, having a noble goal, are areas that they were really, really strong at. And it kind of flowed into their leadership. So join me for a second. This clip is pretty short, and I want to kind of open it up for you, and then I have some questions for you after.
I get it. To do something, anything is hard. It's much easier to blame your father, your mother, the environment, the government, the lack of money. But even if you find a place to assign the blame, it doesn't make the problems go away. I'm trying something new. I'm trying it.
Oh, so now you're gonna come to this school, tell us about our kids, our problems, and how you're gonna fix them with a box step?
No. I'm just gonna show you. Agustin, please, could you?
Mr. Delane, this is absurd. Augustine?
Joe, shut. It's my body. All right. Don't worry. Then we'll just move. There you go. Just like this. Like, very simple. And now we're gonna walk a little bit. Yes, we're gonna walk. We're walking. Are we walking? No, we're dancing. So you know how to walk. You know how to dance. Yeah. You see, if she allows me to lead, she's trusting me. But more than that, she's trusting herself. Now, if your 16-year-old daughter is strong and secure and trusts herself, how likely is she to let some idiot knock her up? And if your son can learn to touch a girl with respect, how will he treat women throughout his life? Beautiful. Thank you.
Names on this piece of paper. Parents who have decided to
Ladies and gentlemen,
terminate your class.
This is what I do here. This is school. I teach dance. And with it, a set of rules that will teach your kids about respect, teamwork, and dignity. And that will help to give them a vision of the future they could have. A vision of the future they could have. Are there any questions?
Do you teach adult?
I love it. I love it. I love it. And that clip, I gave me a little bit of hope too, because he said, you know, if you can walk, you can dance. So with that, think about it from the perspective in these observations. What characteristics of EQ and leadership did you see in the clip? And from that perspective, and maybe Stacy, as I observe you there, if you want to kind of unmute yourself and throw out maybe some things that you saw, and I can share with you some of my thoughts as well. But what characteristics of EQ and leadership did you see in that clip?
Well, I saw, you know, obviously I saw trust. It was one of the big things that he brought into it. Confidence is another one. Or of self-knowing, knowing oneself. That was very important. Where Antonio had that he knew who he was, and he was confident with the knowledge that he had, and confident with this belief. he also had a goal in mind, one of those altruistic goals that he believed in his vision. And that was extremely important too. And those are a few of them that I saw.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for sharing that. And in the end, I noticed the things you mentioned, and I've been on a bit of his consequential thinking. Obviously, he was under a bit of pressure because he was there because there were complaints about what he was doing, what he was teaching, and his methods. And using the metaphors, or I would say maybe object lessons of him dancing with the administrator, I think was a great use of that. And using that to illustrate the power of what of dance is, and the power of leading within that. So maybe a great question for you, Stacy, is for me and for those who will be watching this webinar later. How could what we observed change how we lead?
That's a good question. I would say having the confidence of the knowledge that you have, knowing where, what you have in your vision as well, are two of the important characteristics that could be changed. That would be, giving yourself a firm belief, or having that firm belief and then moving forward with that with conviction is going to create a strong leader. Also noting that, he did it with respect and also with grace as well, and treating the people that are following you and your other compatriots with that respect, and with also giving them the grace. And having grace will allow you to be able to lead much more effectively. Instead of bludgeoning somebody over the head or force leading them, it would, allowing them to fill the space as the superintendent did, and trust herself and trust you.
Yeah, those are great observations, Stacy. And I think also too, it's a great illustration there of he was under a bit of fire. I mean, it's one thing to lead in an environment where everyone is applauding you and encouraging you on. It's another thing to do it when you have opposition. And I think he definitely showed that. But I think there's a key thing, and you mentioned it earlier as well. One of the key competencies inside of our model is the noble goal. I think typically people who have a strong sense of purpose, a greater purpose, larger than themselves, typically are better, stronger leaders. And I want to make it clear for everyone, for those that weren't able to jump on to the webinar this afternoon because of scheduling, as well as to those that may be picking this up off of our YouTube channel or other places. Leadership is not just about you're in charge and you have people that report to you in a work situation. Or if you're a leader inside of a nonprofit or a volunteer situation, whatever it may be. If you're a brother, a mother, a son, a cousin, and you have people in your life, well, guess what? You're a leader because you have influence. So from that perspective, there's a lot that can be gleaned from that. As we move on, I want to talk a little bit about some of our approaches and how we help this. One of the things at Spirit of EQ that we really try to make sure of, and we really are an emotional intelligence data firm as well as a people development firm. And those coincide together, that we start with data. We start with understanding where a person's at when they come into our world, whether it's an individual or whether it's a group, a team, a company, what have you. And as you can look at the slide, there's a great example there, that the stuff that's driving and the stuff really is a determiner, is what happens beneath the iceberg. I like this illustration, even without the words, that the biggest part of an iceberg is what's under the surface. And what we try to do is help people excel with those drivers so that we can get performance. And that's based on how that plays out in behavior. And at the end of the day, the performance is not just about, and I like to stress this, it's not just about making sure that you hit all your objectives for the year so you can get a bonus. That's fine, nothing wrong with that. but we're talking about this is part of your living daily life, whether it shows up at work or whether it shows up in your personal life. Really, really important to note that. This little piece is really kind of an illustration around a few things, right? Again, whether you're a company, large or small, right now, where you're at today is your current results. There's a desire for the new, right? There's that desire that we get to that better place. If you're an individual, it might be, hey, I want to get better at being more empathetic. Today, I'm pretty good at it, but I really want to get better at it because I know it's going to impact my family, my friends, my coworkers. When you look at the current results, the current state is the skills and awareness that you have, right? And maybe part of that awareness is that you want to get better, but it is kind of situated within where you're at, your current state. For us, we come back in when I mentioned earlier about measuring. That's where we take assessments to gather data about where you're at today. We take you to that place of learning. That's where the training piece comes in, kind of looking at that data and kind of determining where the work needs to be done. What are the vulnerabilities? What are the strengths? That kind of thing. Then we come alongside of you and help you with coaching. And I want to stress to you guys, this is not a commercial, because at the end of the day, whether you do it with us, you're with another firm, or you're doing it from reading a book or what have you, here's some key illustrations for you as to how to get there, time in, time out, with us, without us, whoever it may be. So practice is important. Behavior change doesn't just come from observing data. And then we measure and repeat to see where we're at and where we landed, which leads to ultimately those new skills and awareness for those new results. It's not a silver bullet, it is a process. And we kind of stress to people, at the end of the day, you have to be willing to put in the practice and work. You have to show up and you have to put in the work. If you're not willing to do that, most of anything relating to what we're involved in, emotional intelligence specifically, will be a waste of your time and money, quite frankly. This little graph is one that I really kind of dig, and not because I'm a scientist, I'm by no stretch of that nature, but I like the correlation of this. And it's probably not very surprising to you, right? I mean, success ultimately, those who are higher in their emotional intelligence are typically more successful in places like their effectiveness in life, relationships, finance, career, health, quality of life, and those kind of things. A little slide about our solutions and how we do that. But I want to take a minute, and Stacy, certainly if you want to jump in here too with your thoughts. Where do you think it's most important to you that emotional intelligence shows up, and where it needs to be its strongest? Is it in work? Is it in family? Is it in the community? Those kind of things.
That's an interesting question, because I believe that it should be equal. It's in all things, and that you use it everywhere, and it is something that brings balance not only to yourself but to everything that you create and everything that you're involved in.
Yeah, it's interesting, Stacy, the way you mentioned that, because there was a time, probably, I don't know, 10 years or so. I don't have a specific number for it, but where a lot of times employers would kind of look at things from the perspective of leave your personal life at home, right? And I think we're starting to move, and maybe we're even more than on the threshold of it, where we realize that my work is going to be impacted about how good of a father, husband, son, fill in the blank, neighbor, community leader that I am, and that we come to work as a total person, not just a work person. and that's one of our emphasis as well, is to trying to make sure that people understand that. I also think that emotional intelligence can really show up powerfully in the lives of our children. And not to exclude any of those other areas, but whether or not you have kids or not really is not the point as much as whether it's you volunteer at a school, or whether you're a mentor for a young person, or whether, again, if you have your own kids. Because there's such an area of influence because they haven't fully formed and they're looking for that direction and that inspiration, if you will, that quite frankly emotional intelligence kind of brings to the table. So here's kind of a summing up, if you will, as we're getting close to the end. I really, really, really love this quote. And I saw it actually for the first time about 2 months or so ago at a certification training I was at. And it really made me realize that if all we're doing is accumulating knowledge, but not doing anything with it, then it's really, quite frankly, a waste of time. And I realize, I'm going to just say with empathy, it's tough work. You know, you can go and hear someone talk, or you can go to a seminar or a training and be inspired. And then, you know, Monday morning comes along and you're hit with the 50,000 things that seem to conspire against you. And how do you take that knowledge and put it into doing? One of the things, and I mentioned this to you earlier, Stacy, is that we are endeavoring to make sure that we have this sort of regular place where people can go to get the knowledge and get the encouragement to put the knowledge into action. And this gets deeper, right, as you go. I never would tell somebody, hey, just listen to one of our podcast episodes and then you'll be able to figure out emotional intelligence and how to grow it. Because it just doesn't work that way. I also realize that not every company is in a position from a budget standpoint to hire us to spend 6 months or a year helping them get better at emotional intelligence and therefore decision making. So we're trying to offer many avenues that you can go on to put this into action and get moving. Because one of the things that I've mentioned to people, in addition to the willingness to practice and put in the work, is if you want to feel bad about something, if you want to feel like you're failing at something, don't do anything. Don't show up for a webinar. Don't come to an event. Don't take an assessment. Those are things that you could feel bad about because you're not doing anything. And we really put a great deal of emphasis on that part. And this quote kind of encapsulates that really, really well. So I want to thank you for joining us today. Stacey, it was great to meet you and to interact with you. And for those of you that I know are SVP but weren't able to make it, no worries, because I am recording this. So I will make sure this gets spread afar back to you, as well as on our normal channels. At Spirit of EQ, if you'd like to get a hold of us, for me directly, that's my information. But we do have a wonderful podcast, which you can find on iTunes and Google Android devices as well, anywhere that you reach podcasts, as well as we have a YouTube channel just for the Spirit of EQ, where you can check out some of our videos and things of that nature, as well as our website that you can see here. So with that, I'm going to bring it to a close. Once again, appreciate you joining, and we'll see you the next time. Take care.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Take care.